Now I've got several, even the white forms coming up as well. And it's here that I want to plant this, a little beauty I first saw in Christopher Lloyd's garden at Great Dixter. It's called Erigeron carvinskianus, and it will seed itself beautifully. I never bother putting membrane under my pea shingle, because that means I get the seeded plants and that planting is easy. Scrape away the gravel, pulling it off with your trowel, and then, while the soil's hard here, just stab at it and pull it out with your trowel. You might need a bit of pressure. This has been walked on for quite a long while, and it's not particularly nice soil. So what I'm going to do when I've planted this little Erigeron here is put around it some fresh stuff. Now, when you're buying a house, they always say it's location, location, location. When you're planting alpines, it's drainage, drainage, drainage. This soil is a bit on the stiff side, so I want to add to it a bit of ordinary old potting compost with some sharp grit mixed in with it. And I'm dropping a bit of that into the bottom of the hole. I shall feed more around it when it comes to planting. Tap it out of its pot. It's been well watered. The root balls clinging nicely together. Lower it in there. And then fill in around it with more of the same well-drained compost mix. Now what this does is coax the plant's roots out into this really favourable mixture, and when they've established themselves that far, they can then force out into the rest of the soil. Just firm it really well with your fingers. Then I'm going to remove the stuff I excavated from the hole to get it completely out of the way, and then I shall just pull back that washed pea shingle over the surface of the compost there, and you'd never know that this plant hadn't been growing here all its life. I'll water it in now, and it'll very quickly settle and spread. And then when the sun comes out, it'll look lovely. Now that's what you need if you want to do what we're doing in this week's garden cuttings. Ali Ward makes her own sundial.
You're in the garden, you want to know the time, but you've left your watch in the house, and you can't be bothered to take off your muddy boots. I have the answer, the human sundial, and here's how to make it in 3 easy steps. Step 1. Mark a central point in the lawn and set the slate below grass level so that you can easily mow over the top. Step 2. On the hour every hour, stand on the central point and mark where the end of your shadow lies. This does take 2 people, so I've got a friend to help. But if you're on your own, you could put a cane where I am and mark the end of its shadow. Step 3. At each of the marks, set a piece of slate below grass level and mark it with the relevant hour. Now you will need to mark the relevant shadows each hour throughout the day. So why not resign yourself to spending the time doing all those odd jobs you always meant to do in the garden? Or just relax in the sun. Now you can tell the time by standing on the central point and reading where your shadow lies. The children will absolutely love it, and they can use it to tell the time for tea. But more importantly, the adults can use it to tell when it's time for G&T. Yes, it only works when the sun shines, and yes, it isn't very accurate, but at least you can make the most of your time in the garden.
2 months ago, I started this mini trial to compare biological and chemical controls using 2 identical greenhouses stocked with an identical range of plants. Then, mad as it may seem, I introduced some common greenhouse pests: whitefly, mealybug, red spider mite and aphids. Then once their populations had built up, I started the controls. In one, I used a standard ready-to-use insecticide available at any garden centre, and in the other, I used biological controls from a specialist supplier. Now I'm back to see how the biological control compares with the chemical control. Now with the whitefly in the chemically controlled greenhouse, the numbers are down really quite dramatically. There's still a few whitefly about, but not many at all. Whereas in the biological control greenhouse, despite the fact that we've introduced 3 batches of the Incarsia wasp, for some reason the whitefly numbers are just as high as they were at the beginning. The red spider mite in this, the chemical control greenhouse, is still there. You can see a bit of new flecking occurring, and there are a few of the pests about. And in the biological control greenhouse, the situation's exactly the same. A little bit of damage and a few mites around as well, so not a lot of difference there. Now with the aphids, the results have been inconclusive because, despite our efforts, the pests failed to establish in either greenhouse. As far as the mealybugs were concerned, in the biological control greenhouse, initially the Cryptolemus predator seemed to be really effective and munched its way through all the mealybugs, but now it does look as if one or two of the pests may be sneaking back in. Whereas here in the chemical control greenhouse, the effect was brilliant, 100%. But having said that, there is some nasty scorching on some of the foliage, particularly on the Streptocarpus. So it looks as if the results are pretty mixed. The biological control is definitely more expensive. In fact, it would cost 10 times more than the chemicals if you happen to have all 4 of those pests. Though obviously it wouldn't cost quite as much if you only had 1 or 2 of them. As far as effectiveness is concerned, well, there's not a lot in it, though generally speaking the chemicals did do better, particularly when it came to the whitefly. So you may look at all of this and think, well, chemicals are the answer. But bear in mind there are other factors to consider. First of all, there's the environment friendliness. And secondly, if you're treating plants which are edible or which are in a conservatory backing onto your house, do you really want to use all those chemicals? And if you thought that was complicated, this is what I call simple gardening, direct sown hardy annuals. But this is direct sowing with a difference, because in this trial I wanted to compare some specially treated cornflower seeds with a standard version of the same thing. Now the idea behind the treatment of the seeds that I used is that it's meant to make them easier to sow, so the plants should end up better spaced, and in addition it's meant to bring them on 7 to 10 days earlier. But frankly, the way things look at the moment, the standard cornflowers are a lot better than the specially treated ones. The cornflowers produced from the specially treated seeds seem to have a tendency to flop. They're certainly no better spaced, and the way things look at the moment, I'd say that the standard cornflowers are actually a lot further on. While I was here, it seemed like a good idea to take a look at my hanging basket trial and see how that's progressed. Now the point of this trial was to compare 4 different composts to see how they affected the development and flowering of the baskets. Now it may be early days yet, and to be honest, there's not an awful lot of difference, but I'd say that the best of the bunch seems to be the standard peat-based multi-purpose. It's got the most flowers and the best growth. However, think carefully about whether you want a compost with slightly better water-retaining qualities at the expense of the environment. You may decide to avoid any product containing peat. Now, rather interestingly, and to be honest rather surprisingly, the special hanging basket compost and the standard multi-purpose to which we added our own moisture-retaining granules are both looking very similar. Now this rather sad little number on the end is the peat-free multi-purpose. It's definitely got the worst growth and the fewest flowers. But to be fair, it is early days yet, so I'll be back later on in the series to see if there are any developments. But in the meantime, if you're planning on going away for a weekend and you're worried about your hanging baskets drying out, then remember it is well worthwhile putting them into a shady position just for those few days, because it can make all the difference. But if you've already let things go too far, then remember that most hanging baskets can be revived if you just plunge the base into a bucket of water for a few hours, and hopefully it'll carry on looking great for the rest of the summer.
Other jobs you can be getting on with this week. Summer cuttings of fuchsias, pelargoniums and other tender perennials root quickly at this time of year, so take them now to form sturdy plants that will get through the winter easily. Pick lavender as soon as the flowers start to open, tie them in bundles and stick them in your clothes drawer. They'll make them smell lovely. Sow a second crop of herbs such as coriander and dill. Now's a good time of year to treat patio pots with nematodes to kill vine weevil larvae. A lot of people are frightened of picking flowers, but they shouldn't be. If you look upon it as early dead heading, you end up with a lovely bunch for your sitting room or your windowsill. And there's one flower above all others that benefits from regular picking, and that's the sweet pea, a flower that's had a long association with the Spencer family. So what better place for a celebration than Althorpe House in Northamptonshire?